Greetings, my beloved family and friends. This is your brother, Dr. Henry M. Carter, wishing you a day full of peace and prosperity. Peace and prosperity. I hope that you are planning your work and working your plan. It is a plum pleasing pleasure to have this opportunity to come before you this fine day. It's been a phenomenal week for me, and I hope it's been a phenomenal week for you. But just like you, there's been things that's happening in the world that gives me concern. You want to know what is going on. In the words of Marvin Gaye, what is going on, right? It seems like things are just upside down and twisting and turning. And every time you turn on the television, another thing has happened. But what I'm finding out is that we have to sometimes stop, look, and analyze what is happening. And then we have to find a way to connect the dots of all the things that are happening. And we have to see if there's some validity to some of the things that's happening around us. And that's where I've been this week, is just stopping, looking, and analyze. And I want you to stop, look, and analyze what is happening in your life and make a decision about whether the things that are going on in your life merits a change. Stop, look, and analyze what is happening around you. Once again, stop, look, analyze what's going on around you. Sometimes we just don't pay enough attention to the things that need to be paid attention to. So some of the things that went on in my life this week that I had to stop, look, analyze, is one of them. First is I just celebrated 31 years of marriage on January 14th. And you have to kind of stop, look, and analyze and realize that in a time where over 50% of marriages end up in divorce, there are a lot of single parent households. We have to stop, look, and analyze why it's important to have a very productive relationship, and how does that impact everyone around you. Even if you don't have children, it impacts your family, your friends, it impacts the community. And we have to understand that the basis of any country is the community, and the basis of any community is the family, and the family is based on the dynamics of the relationships that's in the family. So we have to pay a lot of attention to the dynamics of the family in order for us to have a very productive community and a productive country. And I think we got a lot of work to do in that area, because we got away from that nucleus family and putting energy towards being productive. And we see the ramifications of that when we see what's going on in the community with our youth, and we see the degraded conditions of our community. We see the deterioration of our education. We begin to realize that something has to be done to strengthen the family. And that's one of the things I reflected on when I thought about my 31 years of marriage. The other thing that I've been reflecting on is Brother Drewski. Brother Drewski put out the video giving satire to what goes on in some churches. And I wanted you to hear the operative word is some churches, not all churches, some churches. And he had receipts to back up what he was doing, because there are video clips that are parallel to exactly what he did in that skit. There are some pastors out here who should not be in the pulpit. They have ulterior motive. What is their motive? And I was talking to one of my cousins yesterday, the good right Reverend Vernon Carter. And he shared with me, he said, cuz I'm doing speaking at a leadership conference, and I'm talking about motives of leadership. What is the motive of leadership? And I think that there are some pastors who have ulterior motives when they get into the pulpit. They are not there to save souls. They're there to exploit. And what Drewski did was to expose those pastors who have a ulterior motive to exploit the people. And the scriptures back him up. There's a scripture that says, woe to the shepherds. Woe to the shepherds. And these are shepherds who are not sincerely concerned with making people's lives better. But I think we have to balance that skit with the fact that 99% of churches are small churches with pastors who authentically care about saving people's lives. And many of them come out of their own pocket to keep the lights on. Many of them come out of their own pocket to help the people in their congregation to pay their light bills. And many of them are not even getting salaries at these churches. And so I don't want us to think that Drewski's skit is the norm for all churches, because it's not. 99% of these churches have 50 members in them. There are not a lot of mega churches. Majority of these places of worship, and then just don't have to be in the Christian world, whether it's in Islam, whether it's in Judaism, have small congregations of committed people who are striving to be a better version of themselves than they were the day before. So I don't think we should just use Drewski's video as the template to judge all churches, because it's not. There are some pimps in the pulpit, yes. But I do have to also say there are some people in the congregation who are enabling the pimps in the pulpit. See? Because God gives us a discerning spirit. And we know when we are being pimped. You know when you're being played, right? However, there are some people who need a sense of belonging, right? They say, hey, I need to feel like I'm a part of something. And they allow themselves to be manipulated into believing that what is being said from that pulpit is in their best interest. Now, don't get me wrong. I don't believe in no poverty preaching either. I believe there has to be a balance. I don't believe in no poverty preaching where you tell folks don't worry about getting nothing while you here. Wait till you die and you're going to get everything when you die in the sweet by and by. No. I don't preach. I believe in a God that's about abundance, overflow, and increase. I believe in a God that said he would bless me. So, but I don't think you should put things before the Creator, right? I think people need to have moral values and character, and you balance that out with them understanding that God desires for them to have abundance, overflow, and increase. So that's my thing on Drewski. But I will say one of the funniest parts when Drewski said, me why I got on Christian Dior and them red bottom shoes. He said, because I'm a Christian and I walk in the blood of Jesus. That was funny. He is talented. You can say many things about Drewski, but Drewski is a very talented person. He is taking the gift that the Creator gave him, and he's showing us some of the things that we need to work on. The next thing that I done stopped, looked, and analyzed about is what is going on with the ICE agents around the country. Ladies and gentlemen, I teach history. I teach history. And I want you all to understand that when you teach history, you can see the signs of when history is repeating itself. I am a teacher of the past. And when I tell you all the boxes are being checked on the same atmosphere that existed in Nazi Germany, all the boxes. The same playbook that Hitler used is being used right now. And the people were asleep until it was too late. And the people are asleep now. Because even though you see people marching in the streets, the vast majority of the people are not paying enough attention to what's going on around them. ICE is Gestapo. Hitler created the Gestapo police to circumvent the Constitution of Germany and to trample on the civil liberties of the German people at that time through fear and intimidation. And they used a false narrative that they were cleaning up Germany of derelicts and derogatory people. And he used that same narrative today. But we see that ICE is out there killing American citizens now and harassing American citizens. So they are officially the modern day Gestapo. Officially. And we should be very concerned about that. Even just yesterday or the day before, the president talked about using an act where he could go into a city, the Insurrection Act, where he could go into a city and bring the military. If he believes that the mayor of that city and the governor of that state has lost control of law and order, he was going to enact the Insurrection Act. That is the same thing Hitler did. He enacted the Insurrection Act to circumvent civil liberties and to circumvent the Constitution of Germany. Well, this president, for the third time, has threatened to use the Insurrection Act, and he's using it on his political enemies. He is trying to wipe out any opposition to his leadership. That's exactly what Hitler did. And you all need to understand that Hitler was democratically elected chancellor of Germany. He controlled their House and Senate. He controlled their Supreme Court, just like is controlled now, the House and Senate and the Supreme Court. And he changed the laws of Germany because he controlled Germany, House and Senate and Supreme Court, where the current president controls the House, the Senate, and the Supreme Court. And so Hitler was able to change the laws, take away the freedom of the German people, to get rid of anyone he felt that was not in a line with his philosophy of white supremacy. Well, this president is poised to do the same thing. And as I shared with my students, people think that slavery can't return. Oh, slavery can return easily. If the House and the Senate agreed that slavery should be instituted, and the president signs off on it, and the Supreme Court agrees with it, slavery is the law of the land again. That's the democratic process that we have. You elected the House and the Senate right? So theoretically, you gave them permission to institute slavery because you put them into the House and the Senate. That's how democracy works. When you say, well, people will go out into the streets, yes, we will have another civil war. We are at a tipping point right now. We are at a tipping point. I am still upset about those that voted. Well, it's not so much those who voted. It's about those who didn't vote. You see? 80% of the people didn't even vote. So the people who did voted for the current president didn't have much opposition because people who had the right to vote didn't vote, and they allowed these fake people on the internet tell you why you shouldn't vote. Oh, you shouldn't vote. Voting don't matter. Voting do matter in a democracy. And you see why it matters, because those who did vote put in a person who has a philosophy that's very similar to what happened in Nazi Germany. So we have to stop, look, analyze what's going on around you. Let me share something else that I understand why he wants Greenland. I understand why he went into Venezuela. I understand why he went into Nigeria. And on part of it is, yes, it is against the basic philosophy of democracy, because these were so-called democratic countries. But ladies and gentlemen, there was a book written in 1948 by George Orwell titled 1984. He switched the years around. The book was written in 1948. He titled the book 1984. And in that book, George Orwell talks about Big Brother watching you. He also talks about the deception of the government to pretend like they were in the best interest of the people. But he also talks about in that book that the world will be reduced to 3 major governments. And today the world is being reduced to 3 major governments, and they all want to take over certain hemispheres of the planet. Those 3 major governments is Russia, China, and America. That is what George Orwell was talking about in his book 1984. And these 3 world governments will control certain sections of the world. President Trump says, we're going to control everything in the Western Hemisphere. Everything will be under our auspices. Russia said we're going to control everything in Europe. Asia said we're going to control everything in China said we're going to control everything in Asia. We're going to control Japan. We're going to control Taiwan. We're going to control the Philippines, Thailand, everything. And only the 3 of us going to control the world. Now, I had to give you that perspective so you can understand, again, why he wants Venezuela, Nigeria, Greenland. Venezuela has, as you already know, one of the largest oil reserves on the planet, meaning they store a lot of oil. They got enough to last 300 billion barrels of oil is stored. You and I are still addicted to fossil fuel. We like our homes to be warm. We like our cars. to be with gasoline instead of switching over to electric vehicles. Instead of using solar power, we still want to use gas. And because you and I are addicted to oil, he who controls the oil controls the world. Russia said, if you don't get Venezuela oil, we will. China said, if you don't get Venezuela oil, we will. So Trump said, before I allow you, Russia and China, to control America, we gonna get it first. So I understand why he went after the oil. I understand. He said the same thing about Nigeria, because China is using a very sophisticated way of doing what President Trump is doing in a very aggressive way. President Trump said, I'm just going to take it. China says, I'm going to put you to sleep, Africa, and I'm going to take it by giving you money, building your infrastructure. But I'm creating a neo-colonialism setup. I'm going to take your country by giving you stuff. The objective is the same. I want control. So China is very aggressive in giving things to African countries, technology, building their infrastructure, giving them money, but they're taking over the country. President Trump said, I'm not giving you anything, I'm just going to take it. Russia's saying, I'm just going to solidify our portion of Europe, because I know that China and America going to eventually come against us, but I need to solidify our portion of Europe. We're not going to expand beyond Europe too much unless we can get in through the back door by partnering with people like Venezuela. And Trump said we ain't going to have that because they're not back door. Now with Greenland, it's a strategic move. Greenland has some natural resources that we use for building cars and other things. But more importantly, Greenland is very strategic because it's between North America and Europe, and it is a great launching base in the event that we enter into World War III. Because we have satellites and other things in Greenland, we can detect if another country by seconds is launching an attack on our country. So strategically, President Trump wants to acquire Greenland. It's because it would protect America from a preempted attack from our enemies. Another thing that's happening in Greenland is that because of global warming, because Greenland has a lot of ice, but because of global warming, the ice is melting and is allowing the shipping lanes to open up because the icebergs are melting and now ships can go through the shipping lane. If we don't control Greenland and China gets Greenland, China will have a greater opportunity to control the shipping lanes between Europe and North America. So President Trump is saying, 1, to detect a preempted attack. 2, to control the shipping lanes, we must take Greenland. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I know you may not agree. However, he who gets it first wins. And if China gets it first, please start sending your children to school to learn Mandarin, learn how to speak Chinese, because they then are going to control a significant amount of power. So we have to stop, look, analyze what's going on around it. I don't agree with everything that number 47 does. God knows 90% of the stuff I do not agree. But some strategic things, I understand why he's doing it. I do understand he is the tip of the spear. He's the tip of the spear. You know, we always got to have a boogeyman, right? It ain't just President Trump. It's the plutocrats. Let me give you a SAT word, Pluto, like the planet Pluto, crats. You have Democrat, plutocrat, oligarch. Plutocrat is a society controlled by the rich. That's what a plutocracy is. We want to believe we live in a democracy, and we do to a certain extent. But for the most part, we live in a plutocracy, a country ran by the 1%. That 1% elects presidents. They write policies. And they use the president as a figurehead to push their agenda. Everything the president is doing is for the plutocracy. They want to be richer and have more control. If it wasn't Trump, it'd be somebody else. Trump is just a tip of the spear. And it's used as a distraction because the human mind needs something to grab onto to blame. But we're fighting not with flesh and blood. We're fighting with spiritual wickedness in high places right here. That's what you're fighting with. You're not fighting with Trump. You're fighting with the philosophy, the belief, the concepts that elected Trump. They keep you and I distracted while they push their agenda. And the distraction happens, and it's going back to the book 1984 with George Orwell. One of the ways that they say they were going to control the people in this book. I want y'all to go back and read this book. Make sure your children read this book. When I was in high school, as a high school senior, it was mandatory that we start reading that book. They don't even make it mandatory anymore because they want you not to be woke. They want you to be asleep. But in that book, one of the ways they controlled the people was through distractions. They say distract them through gambling and other things. We get distracted. They put out things on social media and we talk more about those distracting things than we talk about the agenda of the plutocrats. So they got you distracted. You talk about entertainers, you talk about sports, you talk about what preacher wife got on this dress and that, but you're not concerned with the tricks of the plutocrats. That's by design to keep you distracted. More people talked about the preacher's wife's dress than they talk about what's going on in the streets of America. So you're going to have to stop, look, analyze about what's going on around you because history is repeating itself. And if you wait too long, you will become a slave again. This is your beloved brother, Dr. Henry M. Carter, coming to you all today. I hope something I said is of value to you. I'll see all of y'all at the top because the bottom is way too crowded. Peace.